So, okay, so now you can go, Manai.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Happy International Women's Day. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Untold Story of Refugee Women's Superpowers. I am super excited to be here today. My name is Mona Abdi, and I'm Program Coordinator at Jumpstart Refugee Talent. I believe that there are latent superpowers within all women, and those superpowers come into force when crisis strikes, which defines being a refugee. My personal connection is that I come from a family that sought refuge in Canada. My mom's story is a testament to refugee women's superpowers. The stories are too many and too long to tell, but it suffices to say that she survived a war and saved my family. Before we get started, we acknowledge that we are in the unceded territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat's people and nations. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Jumpstart Refugee Talent is the only nationwide refugee-led nonprofit organization of its kind. Founded in 2016, we focus on the economic empowerment of newly we focus on the Founded in 2016, we focus on the economic empowerment of newly settled refugees in Canada by facilitating meaningful employment and entrepreneurial opportunities. We invite everybody, whether you are a refugee, an employer, a Canadian professional, to visit our website and learn how you can work with us. Visit jumpstartrefugeetalent.ca for more info. For those who are interested in contributing financially, you can donate to UNHCR to gift and support a refugee woman or girl through the UNHCR shop, that is shop.unhcr.ca. Today, we are presenting the untold story of refugee women superpowers. We are lucky to be joined by four amazing women leaders and speakers. I would like to run you through the agenda. So there are essentially three segments in this webinar. The first being the introduction. The second is the portion where the moderator and speakers share learning points and powerful experiences from 4:10 to 4:35. And the remainder of the time will be for the audience to ask your questions. I would also like to highlight some housekeeping practices for the duration of the event. You can start and stop your video camera, but we do encourage you to keep your cameras on. If you have any questions during the presentation, please keep them till the end. We have allocated 20 minutes at the end of the event to give you a chance to ask your questions. Throughout the event, we will keep microphones for participants always disabled um, for when you would want to ask questions to our panelists. You also have the option to send your questions through the chat feature if you wish to do so. In case you have questions for our panelists, please raise your hand using the option available on the participants tab or chat tab, depending on your version of Zoom. The raise hand feature will be in reactions or participants. Wait for our host to call you out by your name and enable your microphones, and then you may voice your questions directly to our panelists. You may also send a question through the chat at this time. In case you are facing any technical issues during the event, please send a chat message to tech support and we will try to address your issue. We are fortunate enough to have these four amazing women leaders and speakers. We welcome Farah Mohammed, Peng Sang Kao, Lauren Young, and Rez Gardi on this International Women's Day. And for those who are just joining, welcome. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our moderator for today's event, Rez Gardi. Rez is a Kurdish New Zealander, international lawyer, and human rights activist. She was born in a refugee camp in Pakistan as her family escaped Saddam Hussein's genocidal campaign against the Kurds. Arriving in New Zealand with nothing, Rez sought to use her difficult start in life as motivation to succeed, becoming New Zealand's first Kurdish female lawyer. She graduated as a Fulbright scholar with a Master's of Law from Roberts Law School and is the first Kurd in history to graduate from Harvard Law. She is currently working in Iraq as a Harvard Human Rights Fellow. She is the founder of Empower, a youth-led organization aiming to address the underrepresentation of refugees in higher education. Through their projects, they empower and enable refugee youth through education, leadership, capacity building so that young refugees can pursue a meaningful future. Actually, something very special to us and a fun fact is that Rez is currently joining us from the grounds and front line of a refugee camp in Bezir, Kurdistan, right now as we speak. Without further ado, we will turn the time over to our esteemed panelist, Rez Gardi.
Thank you for that introduction, Mona. Tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā o, ko Zagros te maunga, ko Tigris te awa, ko Gardi te iwi, ko tika tangata te waka, ko Rez Gardi aho, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. For those of you who are just slightly confused, that was my pipiha. A pipiha is a way of introducing yourself in Māori, the indigenous language of Aotearoa, New Zealand. It tells people who you are by sharing your connections with the people and the places that are important to you. And despite being on the other side of the world, for me, it's always important to start with a pipiha in respect of the place I was fortunate enough to be resettled to and given a home away from persecution, and that's Aotearoa, New Zealand. Happy International Women's Day to all of you, to all you brilliant women and girls, and of course to our male allies who are fighting for the rights of women around the globe. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to Jumpstart's event in recognition of International Women's Day, the untold stories of the refugee woman's superpower. As Mona said, my name is Rez Gardi, and I think she's given me a great introduction. But I'm humbled to be your moderator today alongside such an esteemed panel of truly what I would call superwomen. A little bit about myself. I'm a former refugee, Kurdish refugee. My family fled the genocidal campaign against the Kurds. I was born in a refugee camp in Pakistan, where my family spent 9 years before being resettled to New Zealand. And last year, despite many protests from my parents, I returned to the region where they once fled from many years ago. I'm currently working as a Harvard Sadr Human Rights Fellow, an international lawyer currently based in the Kurdish region of Iraq. I'm also the co-founder of a Center for Asia Pacific Refugee Studies recently established at the University of Auckland in New Zealand, and the founder of Empower. I come from a long line of strong women who've really shaped who I am today. At the age of 10, my mother became the head of her family after her mother and 2 siblings were killed in a chemical attack during the Kurdish genocide, and her father was disabled as a result. Her family fled their Kurdish village in Iraq to Iran seeking safety, not aware that within years they would find themselves amidst the Iranian Revolution, the Iran-Iraq War, and Saddam Hussein's genocidal campaign against the Kurds. With all vestige of Kurdish existence spanned in Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and Syria, it was a particularly dangerous time to identify as Kurdish, let alone a Kurdish woman advocating for human rights and equality to be recognized. Some would consider that my mother had a death wish doing the things that she was doing. By the age of 15, my mother had already been arrested, tortured, and imprisoned countless times for advocating for women's rights. So instead of stories like Cinderella, I was raised by the stories of how many times my mother and her fellow activists were imprisoned or risked death at the hands of the Iranian military who tried to suppress any form of criticism against the regime, particularly criticism coming from women who shouldn't be on the streets in the first place. When we resettled to New Zealand, my mother began the first Kurdish Women's Caucus, despite facing serious backlash due to the prevalence of patriarchy in our community. 20 years later, unfortunately, we're still facing similar challenges. As the daughter of a fierce feminist, I feel privileged to continue the fight for equality. And while we've made huge progress in the face of inequality, we all know that we still have a long way to go to achieve gender equality, especially since the effects of inequality are even further exacerbated for marginalized communities, including refugee and displaced women, disabled women, LGBTQ2 plus communities, women of color, and other vulnerable women. So we must keep fighting. We must acknowledge all the trailblazing women who fought so hard for us to be where we are today. Those whose names we probably all know, but also those thousands of unnamed and unrecognized volunteers that have dedicated their lives to fighting for equality. These women have empowered and equipped us younger generations with the skills, with the learnings and the tools for us to continue striving for equality. As times change, so too has the feminist movement. While the way the movement operates has changed over the years, the fundamental message remains the same, and that message is one of equality. Women's movements and marches around the globe reflect the advantage we have today to use social media and technological advances to galvanize huge parts of society to demand solutions for equality. This has led to an even stronger and growing global movement of advocacy, activism, and support. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is to choose to challenge. And I believe that no matter who we are, where we come from, where we're born, the family we're born into, we all have the power to influence change. Empowered women transform societies, and we can all be champions of change if we choose to keep challenging. I ask you all here today in this conversation to continue to support one another, to empower one another, because together we can be even more tenacious in accelerating gender parity. So I stand before you today, albeit virtually, as a former refugee, as a Kurd, as a woman of color from Aotearoa, New Zealand. And on your screens, you see a group of diverse women. We each represent very different portions of society and different identities, but together, each of us make up part of the movement of women striving for change, and we'll each keep choosing to challenge the status quo. So I'm really, really honored to be able to moderate this session. And without further ado, let's hear from each of our panelists, and in particular, what this year's theme, Choose to Challenge, means for each of you. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It's my great pleasure to introduce firstly Ms. Farah Mohammed. Ms. Farah Mohammed is currently a seasoned senior executive with extensive and broad national and international experience in government and social profit and not-for-profit sectors. For the past 25 years, Farah has worked alongside politicians, entrepreneurs, business leaders, philanthropists, and change makers, including the Nobel laureate Malala Yousafzai. She's the founder of G20, Girls 20, a globally active social enterprise that cultivates a new generation of female leaders through education, through entrepreneurship and global experiences, and provides advice to G20 leaders on how to increase female labor force participation. Farah, we are incredibly, incredibly honored to have you alongside us today. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rez. First of all, your story, the way that you introduced yourself, the fact that you were born in one place and found refuge in another and hold that so deep in your heart is something that you and I connect on. I will say a bit more about my story, but before I do that, I do want to call out to Mustafa and to the Jumpstart team. Thank you for putting this together, for allowing for this space, for a conversation on such an important day when sometimes we forget that not everybody has the same experience, opportunities on International Women's Day. And you often see the big, the bold stories. You don't necessarily take the chance and the time to really understand some of the challenges. So I was thrilled to see that the UN chose Choose to Challenge. For me, Choose to Challenge means many things. Just by way of short background, I was born in Uganda. I'm of Indian heritage. And when people ask me, so where are you from? I usually say Canada. And then they ask me, but where are you really from? And I'm sure people get this all the time. And I'll say, well, I'm really from Canada. I live in Toronto. Oh, what is your background? And I say, I'm Indian heritage, African born and raised in Canada. And I always, but not always meaning in the last 10 years, I now say I'm a refugee, I'm a former refugee. And I'm embarrassed, but humbled and honest enough to tell you that I wasn't always comfortable telling people that I was a refugee, because there's a certain image that people come up with. And now I think with more and more successful refugees who are speaking their truths, telling their stories, we're seeing them at the top of the banks, we're seeing them in all kinds of different places. People are having a better understanding of what it means to be a refugee. What does it mean to be a successful refugee? How does a country benefit from refugees, and how countries just can't survive without refugees and immigrants? So when you talk about choose to challenge, I choose to challenge the stereotypes, the bias that people have when they hear the word refugee, first of all. Second, I would say I choose to challenge the systems in the home, in schools, in workplaces, and in governments that do not recognize the role of women, the importance of women, the impact of women. Third, I would say I am super tired of hearing the first woman to do this, or the first woman to do that, the first girl to do this, the first girl to. I want to live in a world where we don't have any more firsts when it comes to women and girls. So I choose to challenge that we stop looking for the first and we look for the second and the third and the fourth, and we accelerate the change, because it's not enough to say, oh, we've ticked that box. So for me, one of the things that I've heard so much from Jumpstart that I've learned is that you often hear the word resilience. You hear it in terms of when you talk about women are resilient. You hear it when you talk about refugees, but resilience is not just a word, it's a way of life. And I think refugees who come to a different country, and I think about my mom and my dad and so many people that I've met, the resilience that they have, they cannot be expected to be resilient alone, particularly women, and particularly in this time when COVID has had such a far-reaching impact on women. So I want to again thank you for the opportunity to share some of my views. I hope that next International Women's Day will look at a post-COVID world where refugees are again part of the solution for so many of the challenges that countries are facing, and that women who are entrepreneurial in nature are at the center of that.
Thank you so much, Farah. It's truly great to hear from you, and I'm sure many of us in this chat, including myself, have had similar sentiments of grappling with embarrassment, but at the same time, or perhaps afterwards, pride for refugee background and the resilience that comes from the experiences of displacement. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Next, I'd like to introduce Miss Ping Sang Chow. Sorry, is it Chow? I should have asked before we started this event, because I really hate Carl. I really hate getting names wrong.
Okay.
Miss Ping Sang Carl. Miss Ping has been named as part of Canada's top 19 tech titans of 2019 by IBM. She is the former president and CEO of Transformix Engineering Incorporation, and has successfully taken the company from her basement to one of Canada's manufacturing success stories as an international supplier of advanced manufacturing technologies. Recently, Peng joined the UNHCR Canada Advisory Council, which seeks to raise awareness of UNHCR's work through outreach to organizations, business leaders, and key decision makers in the corporate community. Their goal is to encourage those within the sector to provide access to employment for refugees in Canada, and to provide the financial means to help support displaced people globally. So as you can tell, she's really an entrepreneurial powerhouse. So it's with my great pleasure that I hand over to you, Ping.
Thank you, Rez. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. So I won't tell you too much about my story, because there's enough written about it. If you're interested in Google me or check out my LinkedIn page. Because today's theme is choose to challenge, I think I want to choose us all to challenge, to think about the women who have make an impact in our lives, our moms, our grandma, our older sister, aunts, women, whatever that may be, that has walked into your life and has impacted your life. As you can see, these are great stories of the women in this panel who are all very successful, but they're all careers like myself. So I want to challenge women that, and I'm going to talk about my mother instead of myself, who may not have the educations or may not have a career success that people are inviting them to a panel such as this, but who are equally, if not more important, has impacted our lives to give us the opportunities to be where we are today. So just a quick story. I actually was born in Cambodia when I was 5. My families were actually very well-to-do when I was 5. The war started in Cambodia, civil war, went through 4+ years of what they call the Asian Holocaust, survived that. My family escaped. Lots of horror stories, won't go there today. So Vietnam invaded Cambodia, so we escaped at that time, ended up in a refugee camp in Thailand, lived in a refugee camp for about 2 years, and thank goodness Canada at that time decided that they can accept refugees from Southeast Asia. And we were part of that wave that arrived in Canada, landed in Montreal with just a clothes on our back. We were handed a change of outfit, a pair of shoes. And I can still describe to you what that shoes look like, because that's the impact it has on you, or on me, I should say. And anyway, so that's enough about me. But if you want to read about my career, like I said, check out my LinkedIn page. I want to talk about my mother, because today the challenge is to think about women who make impact in our lives. And my mother was born very poor to a farming family in China with a grade 1 education, because women were not allowed to work at that time. And her father passed away when she was 3. Yet she is probably one of the strongest, wisest women I've ever met in my life. And I call her a closet feminist, because growing up, I was constantly being told what women can and cannot do, because that's how she was raised. Yet, despite all of that, she would tell us stories of how she managed the employees in Cambodia that my dad had, and the servants and the chauffeurs, and all the people that worked for her. So if there was a fancy title, she would have been like Chief Human Resource Officer or something like that, and she would probably be part of this panel. But there was no such title. And I would always say, and hear many of my interview, that I learned how to deal with people, how to manage people. My leadership style is because of my mother. And when we came to Canada, we literally, as I said, had nothing at all. My dad, despite having built a successful business in Cambodia, and at washing dishes, on a $5 budget for grocery for a family of 10, he managed to save enough money to send it back to families still in refugee camp and in China, and pay the government back for air flights. And my mother was so determined that her children were going to be educated. And so she drilled that into her head. And she used to say, I will not raise a pail of worm, meaning that she's going to raise her children and her grandchildren to give back to society. And so she did that. Most of my siblings are entrepreneurs. If not, they're all professionals. She helped raise the first 5 grandkids, because my older siblings have to work multiple jobs in order for us to survive. And she passed away 15 years ago now. But she will always be my role model. So that's the first challenge. Just think about the women in your life and the impact they have made to you. The second challenge, Farhad had already said it, but I want to reiterate, is to challenge the status quo. Not just in terms of society's perception of what we women, or what we refugee women can and cannot do, but your own perception. Because you and I both know, if you are a refugee woman, we didn't pick to be refugee by choice. We didn't pick to be different by choice. We were forced into it. And so because of that, we land in a country where the culture is different from our family than what they're used to growing up. we are forced to accept a culture that we don't understand and they don't understand. And so there's a certain perception of what we should and shouldn't be as women. And I used to be called the bad Chinese girl, right? Because I was ambitious, driven, you know, all the things that I would say that North American culture would celebrate, not so much in my culture. And so it was a constant challenge to accept yourself, embrace yourself, be okay with who you are. And the thing is, you know, if you chose to stay home and raise an amazing family, like my mom did, that's all right too, but it's a choice. And that's what being a feminism mean, is to have the power to choose what you want to do and celebrate for who you are, because that's your choice, not because it's been forced on you by your family, by your own perception in your head of what you should or shouldn't be, and by society as a whole. So I challenge all of us to continue fighting that internally and externally. Back to you, Rez.
Thank you so much, Ping. Those are strong words and great challenge to us all to continue to choose what we want to do and to overcome barriers and provide opportunities for ourselves that we may think are not for us or that we're not good enough for. So thank you for the reminder to keep challenging our own perceptions as well as society's perceptions. Next, I'd like to introduce Miss Lauren Jade Young. Currently, Lauren is working as the Intake and Case Support Officer at Rainbow Railroad, an international charitable organization that helps persecuted by in divine safety. Lauren is a registered social service worker. She's a member of the Anti-Black Racism Committee at Ryerson University, and she's the co-chair of the Toronto Police LGBTQI2 S Community Consultative Committee. Lauren, it's an honor to have you here today, and I hand over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. I think I'm, of all the panelists, I am the youngest here in terms of years in Canada. So I just came to Canada January 2015, 6 years ago. I don't have a lot of accolades behind my name, but I'll share my story with you. I was well in my 30s, you know, settled uncomfortably in my life as a lesbian in Jamaica when mountain incident propelled me to leave. Back in Jamaica, I had a stable job with the government. I worked as an accounts officer, collections officer, but that was as far as stability went for me. My experience coming to Canada was marred with, I would say, trepidation and naivety. I knew what I was running from, but not what awaits me in Canada. And to be honest, at the time, it didn't matter to me what my fate here would be. I just know that once I was able to breathe comfortably in my skin as a lesbian woman, that I will be able to find my way. I have always thought of myself as a positive, you know, determined person, caring, always helping others I meet. And I think that these qualities have helped pave the way and the welcome and the endless opportunities I received here. However, this paved way was not without challenges. I came hauntingly close to hopelessness, but self-determination and external help from my best friend who lived in Florida, from the family I stayed with in Ajax that knew nothing about me but accepted me and loved me, and from the 519 Community Center prevented that demise. I think some of the challenges, I think one of the biggest challenges for me arriving in Canada was I was immediately placed in categories. You know, living in Jamaica, you just know that you're a female, you know, you're a woman, and that's it. But I was placed in categories. I was now a minority due to my race, a minority due to my gender, a minority due to my sexual orientation, and a minority due to my refugee status. However, most defining and leveling of these labels was being a newcomer. Being a newcomer meant to the country that I was less equipped to navigate the challenges derived from other mentioned categories I was placed in. I was well aware that these challenges were constructed prior to my arrival, and further inquiry informed me that most of the hurdles can be eased by accessing local services. However, that was tedious for me, as most were located in Toronto and I resided in the suburbs with complete dependence on public transportation. Job availability was most prevalent in the city. So I had to devise a plan to ready me for relocation to this city. So I had a visa to Canada, and when life was unbearable, when I was close to death in Jamaica, I ran to Canada and I got protection from Canada. So my story is kind of like a flip from being a refugee or living in a camp. I came here and then I sought approval to asylum here in Canada. I was on Ontario Works. I spent like a year on Ontario Works, and even though it afforded me an income, it was not meant to be sufficient to sustain financial security. And like most newcomer, one of the challenges that your resume is emptied of, job experience or education in Canada. And so the first thing I did was I had to start over. I had to start from scratch. Everything that I've built, for myself in Jamaica and wherever I've reached and accomplished, I had to start from scratch again. I never had the money to send back to Jamaica to ask for credits from school to show your documents and stuff like that. So it was hard for me. And I just decided that, if this is going to be my new home, I'm going to just restart. So the first thing I did, I completed my Ontario High School diploma. I got my security license that provided me a job as a security guard in the city, and I just moved to the city. My salary at the time was $16 per hour, but transportation challenges consume most of my income. And so for a more sustainable living, I decided that I need to move to the city and for work, closer to work, and then to attend college. I did all of that. I applied to Humber College Social Service Worker Program and I got accepted. Being a full-time student loan recipient meant that I had to work part-time while attending college. The job that I had afforded other employees the opportunity to work part-time while going to school, but refused my request to do the same. It was hard to ignore that my fellow coworkers who were working part-time while attending college were all non-Black. I was told that if I resigned my full-time position, that I would not be offered a part-time placement, and education meant upward mobility. So I reluctantly resigned. I was now faced with racial inequality, prejudice, but wasn't equipped with the time or the resources to fight that battle. And I kind of like the theme of this year, choose to. Instead, I used my time to seek another job as I was facing severe financial difficulties. And I think this is one of the challenges that a lot of asylum seekers and refugees do face in Canada. They know that they're being wronged. They know that they're experiencing injustices and stuff like that, but we're not equipped with the knowledge. We're not equipped we don't have the time because, we're restarting our lives, we're not at that crossroad where we can sit and think that, what, I need to challenge this. What, I need to fix this. I need to be a part of this system so I can help to be a part of the change that is gonna come. So the challenge of racial prejudice I had encountered on the job, after a while it shifted to housing. And I'll share a little about my story. Weeks before completing my diploma, I acquired a better paying job. I then decided to seek the help of a realtor to secure an apartment. As per my realtor and the potential landlord, I had well surpassed the requirement to rent an apartment I had seen online. I was pre-approved. I viewed a place and everything was okay. But then when I went back to meet the landlord, I was told that the property is no longer available and that it was rented to someone weeks before, which I know was a blatant lie because the realtor had the key to the lockbox, so it could not have been possible. And the realtor said to me, which is a white man, he said to me, Lauren, I wish I never had to say this to you. I don't know how to say this to you, but this is just racism, in its form. And so at the time, like previous encounter with racial prejudice, I decided against fighting the injustice. It was a difficult decision to make, but my decision was informed by my reality. One, I was a newcomer. I was still lacking time and resources needed to fight such a battle. Time was currency I had to spend wisely. And I think most newcomers can say that the wisdom and the frugality have readied me to face and overcome my next challenge. And I would say that I'm still experiencing, my experiences is still unfolding. And now I'm at a different crossroad where I'm ready to challenge. And that is why I've aligned myself in the field of social work so that I can be a part of the change for all newcomers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing your story with us and the challenges that you've overcome. And yes, of course, it's important sometimes to choose the battles that we want to fight wisely and which ones we want to dedicate our time, our energy, and our efforts to. But thank you so much for your resilience. And I look forward to chatting to each of you more as we turn to the questions now. So we've got one chat from the audience, and we'll start with that one. Can you share your number one habit or routine that has helped deepen your reserve of resilience in the face of hardship and obstacles? And that's by Daryl Pinto. Just to add to that, I mean, the common theme that we've heard through your brief statements is how each of you have overcome tremendous barriers, whether yourselves, your families, your mothers, or those around you, and demonstrated great resilience to get to where you are today. And so I think it is a common question that we get: where do you get your resilience from? And how do you deepen this reserve of your resilience, as Daryl has asked? So I'll turn to you first, Farah.
There we go. Just unmuting myself. It is such a great question. I don't know that I have a habit, but I think I have, over the years, managed to build around me a group of individuals. Some of them have been former bosses, some of them are girlfriends, some of them are guy friends. A group of people who, when you're having those days where you don't feel resilient, they're there to remind you of what is within you. So that's the first thing, is I would say it's really important to build that network of people who get you. You know, you don't always want to be on. You can't always be on. People see you in a certain way if you're a public figure. And so I think it's really important to surround yourself with real people who will keep it real for you. And you'll be able to be resilient through some of the toughest times in your life. The only other thing I would add is somebody told me a long time ago, and I take this to heart, is if you don't feel, and maybe this is a habit, if you don't feel that you can take a risk on yourself, probably nobody else will. And so that might be more of a mantra than it is a habit, but I've kept that really near and dear to my heart, because I do believe if you know, we've heard from the other panelists, particularly Lauren, if you don't take a risk on yourself, you don't understand what your battles are, then nobody else is going to do that for you.
Great words and wisdom to live by. Thank you so much, Farah. Next, I'd like to turn to Ping. Same question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I've always had a fighting spirit as a young child. I remember in the refugee camp, I was always getting myself into fights with my cousins, with my siblings. You know, I think when you're the 9th child in a family of 11 kids and living in a refugee camp, you become a scrapper because you don't really have a choice. And, you know, you can't tell because we all appear tall, which is what I love about Zoom, but I'm less than 5 feet tall. And so I was always a tiny little person, and there's always a fighting spirit in me. And I always say that the greatest gift you can give me is when I tell you I want to do something and you tell me that I can't, because I'm going to show you that I can. that I can do it. And that I think started when I was, I don't know, maybe about 4 years, having come to Canada. And, so keep in mind that when we came to Canada, we did not speak a word of English. So I had to start from the bottom. And I remember there was a speech competition that I wanted so desperately to win. So that's the other part, is this competitive nature in me. And I wanted so desperately to win. And I remember my fourth brother saying, "You're not going to win that. Like, come on, And I was so determined. I'm gonna win this award. And to be honest, I mean, come on, it was like grade 7 or it was a grade 7. So what is the award? Probably some little cheap trophy that I don't remember. But the winning was just so empowered that ever since then, I hold on to that, right? Because all of my life, I was told what I cannot do. You can't do this because you're a girl. You can't run an engineering firm because you're not an engineer. So the word can't, I don't understand. And so I don't have a bottom of resiliency that I can keep I don't have to worry about it emptying out, because I don't understand the word can't not. What do you mean you cannot? If someone tell you cannot do something, it just means you have to be more creative with a solution, because there's always a solutions. Because people used to ask me, if you want to go into Brazil to start your business, what did you do? I hear there's all sorts of red tape. I'm like, of course there are. But life is no different than entrepreneurship. There's always big boulders put in front of you, whether it's by yourself because your mind did it, or because society, or because parents, I don't care what it is. There's always big boulders that put in front of you. Your job is to figure out how you're going to crush the boulder, walk around the boulder, run around the boulder, or dig a massive hole and go across under that boulder. Because you're not going to let that boulder stop you. And if you have that mindset, resilient is just a word. You can do anything you want. And there is no bottom. It's always there. So don't tell me the word cannot. And I tell my staff that as well. Do not tell me the word cannot, because cannot usually piss me off. It just means you haven't tried hard enough. And you haven't endured enough pain. So let's get back to work.
You're here.
I put a smile there.
Hey, can I just tell you, Peng?
Yeah.
Hey, Peng, can I just tell you, I'm 5'1¼ and I too love Zoom, because no one knows that I'm 5'1¼ So I'm with you on everything you said, but also how you are.
I'm 4'11.5", as I like to remind my teenage son who's almost 6.
I guess they've all strategically picked short women, because I'm 5'2" here. Ping, I want to just get a recording of what you just said and use it every time I need to be pumped up, because that was just incredible.
Yeah.
I could feel the energy.
Just call me.
I mean,
I think
call me,
definitely, ladies.
That's the kind of pep talk. That's exactly the kind of pep talk you need before any kind of major event in your life. And I know you've told us you're less than 5 foot, but I mean, speaking for myself, and I'm sure no one else in this audience ever wants to be fighting you. I hope you're always on my side.
My company has a couple of nicknames for me. One was Tasmania, and the other one was the Grecan. Release the Grecan, from the Greek mythology. So, and in fact, when my employees finally told me who that was, I finally found out the nickname, after we wind down the company, because my IP got purchased by ATF. I said, all right, guys, who came up with this name? And turned out to be the man I married, so.
That's amazing. Lauren, moving to you, but I think it's been some time since I first read the question, so I'll just repeat it just in case the audience or anyone needs it. The question was, can you share your #1 habit or routine that has helped deepen your reserve of resilience in the face of hardship and obstacles? Over to you, Lauren.
Okay, I think there are a lot of #1s, but I think I like the phrase, and I live by it. It's my mantra by Maya Angelou that says, "I am the dream and the hope of the slave." And I think I use that to when I think about my foreparents and what they went through, and when I think about where I'm at now, my social location, I'm at a a position to continue to make that change possible. So I think that works for me. I like motivational quotes. I'm also a very practical person, very unorthodox. So I believe like in vision boards. So everything I want to accomplish, I put it on a vision board and I write my objective under it. Okay, I need to get my Ontario High School diploma. What do I need to get my Ontario? What steps do I need to take? And, you know, just tick them off and I put it in a place where I will always be reminded of it. And I think also my family upbringing, my mommy, I'm my mother's child, I would say. She was a very strong person, very just person, always thinking about, you know, caring for others, always respectful, always showing us, you know, once you started, you have to finish. You just have to finish. You have no excuse, you know, if persons are here from the Caribbean, you know, or some African culture, you know that once you start something, you just have to finish. And it's not hard. You just, for me, what works for me, I focus on my path and not the path of someone else, okay, where they are, what they've accomplished, and you know how they got there. I just know that once I start, I continue one step at a time. You know, I set realistic goals. That works for me.
Thanks. That's an incredible idea, the vision board. I think that definitely helps with keeping you on track. And when you visualize what you need to achieve and you tick it off, it's always very satisfying.
Yes.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing your strategies and your wisdom for how you become resilient superwoman that you are. I'm going to the next question now from Mehranges Monsef, who says, Tashakur, thank you for your honest story of transformation and profound beauty. I'm wondering if you have recommendations for what funders, agencies, frontline staff, and other immigrants can do to support newcomers to Turtle Island in North America to assist them in their growth, evolution, and reaching their full potential. So, I mean, it's a great question. If we can even expand it more to newcomers in general to your place of residence, I think that would be relatable for more people in the audience. So let's go to you first, Ping.
Raz, I'm super embarrassed because I missed your question as I was reading some direct messages to me. So could you repeat that? And unless
No.
one of the other amazing women wants to speak first and I can listen. So
Yeah,
did you
sure.
want to...
I think it was it was a bit of a summary before the question, so I think I will shorten it so we can get to the point. Basically asking what funders, agencies, frontline staff, and other immigrants can do to support newcomers and to assist them in their growth, evolution, and reaching their new potential.
I can go if Ping needs.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I like quotes. I just said I like quotes, right? And one of the quotes, my favorite of all time is by A. Toffler that says, the illiterate of the 21st century will be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. The illiterate of the 21st century will be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So like everything else in life that evolves, so must we. So we must seek to learn, right? We're in a diverse city, probably one of the most diverse cities in the entire world, where you can find every creed, every religion, every people. As a frontline staff, educate yourself. If you have your biases, check yourself, educate yourself. Culture has taught you whatever it taught you, you can unlearn it and relearn. You can learn to be tolerant. You can learn to learn other things. You know what I mean? And open up yourself to that, and just treat people like you would have wanted somebody to treat you. When I see somebody in front of me, I don't see your color. I don't see the texture of your hair. I don't hear your accent. I see a human being. And if we can all like adapt to something similar to that, you know, just having some compassion, some empathy, some humility and respect for persons, then we'll be okay. But the process of learning is ongoing. Every day you get up, you have to make a calculated decision to want to be better. to want to learn more, to want to understand more so that you can respond effectively and properly to persons who are in crisis and persons who are seeking help from you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I see there are quite a number of questions coming through, so perhaps I won't put all questions to each of you, but rather pick and choose based on some of the stories you've shared and what I think might be interesting for you to respond to. But of course, if anyone wants to answer a question as well, feel free to jump in. So the next question we have.
Rez,
Can I just quickly, oh, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was going to add, so the question is, what can frontline workers help with refugees? Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to say something that may not be popular, but I'm going to say it I say it anyway because I think it's important. I think sometime in the society of being politically correct, we forget to help newcomer understand that there is a certain amount of adapting to the Canadian work culture that we all must go through in order to be successful. And it's not that I am contradicting the fact that we need to celebrate other culture and be accepting and embracing of that. But hear me out. I come from the other side as well. I grew up in an environment where every single family members are refugees. Every single family friends are refugees. And those who succeed and those who don't succeed in terms of being able to, purely from a financial point of view, is that there's a certain amount of cultural adoption that you have to go through, because you can't expect Canadian corporations to be able to change their culture for every different refugee that comes in with a different cultural background. And if we don't try to educate that aspect of it, because we want to be so politically correct, we are doing a disservice to the refugees and the newcomers that are looking for work. And I say this whenever I'm asked to be a guest speaker on this particular issue, because I want to see people succeed. And I can say this with honesty, because when I travel for international business, I do not expect my clients to adapt to my understanding of what their business culture is like. There's a book that I have called Shake Hand, Kiss, and Bow, I think. And the whole idea is you learn to adapt to whatever culture it is you need to adapt to in order to be able to transact your business, right? Celebrate your culture with your friends, celebrate your culture with your families, but embrace that there is a work culture in our society, in Canada, that's different in each nation's, if we want to be successful in the corporate world.
Thanks, Peng. And I think, Farah, you were also going to say something, am I right?
Yeah, I was. And I'll just say, you know, to the question about what can funders do, because I think it was what can funders and a whole bunch of others. So in terms of government and funders, I think there are three things. And Peng, I would agree with you. You know, I think that people need to understand what the way of the country is without giving up what it is that they believe in or their values or whatever. But there are three things I think that funders can do. And I've been on the side of being the funder. First of all, be open-minded in your funding. Like, don't just go narrow. This is how we do things. This is how we're going to do this. You know, refugees are a very different group. You have to be open-minded. Second, allow for creative solutions. You know, refugees are entrepreneurial. I will, that if I say nothing else today, please know that I believe that with every fiber in my being. They are entrepreneurial because they have had to survive and thrive and find different ways around, as Peng said, go in, go around, go above, whatever. That is really important. So you have to allow for creative solutions. And third, understand the lived experience. You don't know it, but try to understand the lived experience and make that part of the solution. Because again, when you are fighting for your life, you're thinking outside the box like nobody in a boardroom has ever had to do. So that's my sort of the three things I think people should do.
Thanks, Farah. We've got so many questions, I think more questions than we've got time for. So we'll just try and get through as many as we can. They're all great questions. One question that's just come through, and Farah, I'd like to pose it to you because of what you mentioned in your opening address about once upon a time being ashamed of your refugee background and then coming to respect it and be proud of it. The question says, it's from Kalina Noronha. I'm an asylum seeker living in the UK who struggle to openly admit what I am. What advice would you give to overcome the stigma behind being an asylum seeker?
So I just want to correct one thing. I wasn't ashamed or embarrassed. I was not, and this might be parsing words, I was not somebody who put that in the forefront like I do today.
Right.
So I think it's really important to understand that. What advice would I provide? Look, I think again, this is so personal. And I think whatever advice I give you, you're going to have to sort of figure out how you navigated in the situation you are in. But I would say more and more now, people are understanding what it means to be an asylum seeker. And more, there are organizations like Jumpstart, organizations that will help you navigate. And it's really important to find the balance between how much do I fit in, as Peng said, and how much do I wear, outwardly so that I'm an asylum seeker. 20 years ago, being a refugee, being an asylum seeker had a very different meaning than what it has today, because there are sadly, so many more. So I would say maybe one or two things personally. One, I regret that I didn't speak about it until I was probably more well known, or that I had a platform to speak about it. But don't push yourself so much that you feel like you're carrying the burden of speaking for every asylum seeker out there. Don't do that to yourself. Don't put that burden on yourself. So that's my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice is I do believe in power in numbers. I do believe that people who have shared and lived experiences can come together and try to navigate the space that you live in. If you live in the UK, if you live in Canada, if you live in the US in the last couple of years, being an asylum seeker would have been the hardest thing to do, right? So I really think you have to be very, very aware of the boundaries that you're able to navigate in without ever feeling ashamed or feeling like you have to hide it, because I do think we live in different times now. And I hope that that's helpful.
Thanks, Farah. That's very helpful advice. Myself, I was going to school during the aftermath of 9/11. And so I remember quite vividly the repercussions on our communities for those who visibly look different. And really, I was deeply ashamed and even scared to identify as someone from the Middle East, someone from a Muslim community, someone from a refugee background. And so it took many years to gain the courage and resilience to talk about my story. We're running out of time and we've had so many questions that unfortunately we're not going to be able to answer, but I'd just like to end with one sentence from each of our brilliant panelists, something practical, a call from action from each of you, for civil society, for governments, for other refugee women, you choose, but one call for action that you would like to end on. And then everyone else in the audience, feel free to add a call to action in the chat option. It would be great to hear your responses too. So, I mean, whoever wants to go next, perhaps we go with Peng. Yeah.
Yeah, happy to. I think it's, I don't know about other countries. Canada has, I think, has done a great job in terms of our programs to support refugees and, promoting multiculturalism. I mean, can we improve? Absolutely, right? Absolutely. We can always do better. But in general, Canada has done a very good job. So I think my message is more for the women out there, the refugee women out there, and those who may not as well, is that believe in yourself. There is no program in the world that will ever, ever, ever beat you believing in yourself. And I'm going to take what Farad said, if you don't mind, is that live for yourself. I don't, it took me a long time to accept this idea that I'm a role model, because I didn't live my life to be a role model. And even today, when I'm a mentor, I'm a coach for a number of entrepreneurs, my advice to them is, this is my experience. I'm telling you the path that I went through so that you don't make the same mistake as me, but you'll make your own, right? So if you live for others, you're always trying to make a decision for them. Your success, whatever that may be, whether it's just for your daughter, for your niece, for some little girls you have never met, your success will be an inspiration on its own without you having to do anything. But if you continue to live for others, you will never get to where you want to be, wherever that may be. And your destination is different than my destination, and that's okay too. But believe in yourself. There's no program in the world that will ever beat that.
That's really well said. Why don't I jump in and I'd say, I think one of the hardest things to do is to know when to take a deep breath and know when to slow down. Life is a marathon. It is not a sprint. There are going to be many, many opportunities. And if I had listened to my younger, or somebody who had told my younger self, slow down and don't be in a hurry to get everything done so quickly, because sometimes the opportunities come at different times. The second thing I would say, and this has been something that has defined me, both because it was done for me, but also because I like to do it for others, take others along. If you're invited to something, take another woman who is a refugee along with you and clear the path for that person. I guarantee you will get more out of it as much as they get out of it, but clear the path. Networks matter, opportunities matter. If you can take somebody along with you, whether it's an event when we get back to having face-to-face, if it's a webinar like something like this, please create the space for a refugee so they can start their journey to become better integrated, better networked, more knowledgeable. It costs you nothing but time.
Do I go ahead?
Go ahead, Dia.
Okay, so my last 2 cents. We know about all the discrimination, all the injustices against minorities. We cannot change people. We can only hope. But my message to you is, do not sit and hope or wait for individual morality to kick in, You can be a part of that change. Make that change by advocating for marginalized people, for marginalized women. And when I say women, I'm including transsexual women also. Become allies, because those are the people that we need to make the changes for us, Back in the days when Black people was enslaved, right? And they were prevented from doing certain things. It is not the people that changed, right? But rather the law, right? People didn't change. And mind you, we still have that perception, we still have that worldview of people still living now. And that is why there are still injustices, right? I mean, Canada has done good so far, but there are still injustices. There are still minority that need our voices, that need allies to help and to advocate and to change laws, okay? People did not change, and we're not supposed to sit and wait until people change. We're supposed to advocate that laws are changed, because laws will keep them in check.
Thanks very much, Lauren. I think what this conversation, and as well as what the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted more than anything, is how interconnected many of our challenges are, and how the situation is further exacerbated for those who are already vulnerable and from marginalized communities. But importantly, that we cannot thrive while others are suffering, and that the only way forward is to come to the aid of the ultra vulnerable, to keep fighting together and to keep choosing to challenge, and the solidarity that we need to overcome together to face some of the biggest challenges that are facing our communities today. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today for this event in honor of International Women's Day. And I think I'm going to hand back to Mona now to close the event. But from me, thank you all so much. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Also, thank you, Sarah, and Lauren, all once again. And it's truly been a pleasure to have each of you share in this space and be so transparent. Thank you, Jumpstart team. I know that there are resilient and tenacious refugee women among us in the audience. A huge appreciation to our viewers for joining us and participating. Remember to visit jumpstartrefugee.ca and stay up to date with our work. Again, if you wish to donate to UNHCR to support women and girls, check out the UNHCR shop. That's shop.unhcr.ca. I wish everyone a wonderful International Women's Day, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.